North Korea's once reclusive leader has been to China yet again. Kim Jong-un took a train to meet with China's president, the fourth summit between the two leaders in the past year. And it comes as the U.S. president says he could hold a second summit with Mr. Kim. John Sudworth reports from Beijing.
It was quite a send-off. Kim Jong-un and his wife, Ri Sol-ju, were shown boarding their bulletproof train in Pyongyang, accompanied by the usual adoring state media commentary. They arrived in Beijing on Mr. Kim's birthday. China's unlikely to give him any unpleasant surprises.
China certainly would encourage North Korea to give up the nuclear weapons, but not necessarily push North Korea into a corner.
Why?
Because it sees in the past years, China believes if the pressure is too high, that will be counterproductive.
The US has no such qualms, so Kim Jong-un's fourth visit to China sends a message. It underlines the strength of the bond and shows that if the nuclear diplomacy with America fails, he has other options. Preparations are now underway for a second Trump-Kim summit. Mr. Kim has so far made few real concessions. North Korea has long used its nuclear weapons to play the big powers off against each other, precisely the reason, some argue, it's unlikely to ever give them up. John Sudworth, BBC News, Beijing.
And for more on Kim's visit, I'm joined by Bruce Klingner, a former CIA Deputy Division Chief for Korea, who's now at the Heritage Foundation. So, Bruce, Kim Jong-un is getting a very warm embrace from China on his birthday, but does Beijing really care whether he makes progress on denuclearization or not?
Well, China certainly likes this status quo than a year ago when we were talking about U.S. preventive attacks on North Korea. So they would rather have a stumbling along diplomacy occurring rather than threats of either North Korean nuclear missile tests or U.S. doing some kind of military attack.
And has Kim Jong-un actually done much since that much-fated summit with President Trump in Singapore last year?
No, we haven't made any progress since Singapore. The North Koreans have disabled a couple of test sites that months before they said they no longer need because they've successfully completed the nuclear warhead and the ICBM programs.
And yet we have the US actively talking about scouting for locations for a second summit with Kim Jong-un. So why the need for that summit?
Well, it really goes against what has been U.S. sort of traditional diplomacy, a bottom-up approach where if you make progress at the working level, then you elevate it up to eventually having a presidential summit who would normally just be signing a completed document. The Trump administration has done the opposite, a top-down approach, seeing that if the old approach didn't work, have the two leaders work together and perhaps they can create a breakthrough to the logjam.
So what kind of calculation is Kim Jong-un making here, that as long as he's not carrying out nuclear tests, the US will be happy enough?
That could be it. Also, what North Koreans have been doing is trying to decouple the president from the rest of the administration. They see the president is more likely to offer unilateral concessions, as he did in Singapore, whereas Secretary Pompeo and Special Envoy Began are more likely to demand North Korea take actual steps towards denuclearization, as they're required to do under 11 UN resolutions.
Kim Jong-un has played cat and mouse with inspectors for years. He spent years building up this nuclear arsenal. It's a family tradition. Is he ever going to give it up when it's such a good bargaining chip?
Well, it's really not a bargaining chip if he's never going to give it up. We see it as a military capability. It's a way of intimidating the neighbors as a deterrent against a U.S. or South Korean response to North Korean actions. So, they've been working on this program since the 1960s. They're unlikely to give it up.
There are both UN Security Council sanctions and US sanctions against North Korea. Have they been relaxed at all in this process?
Not officially. The UN resolutions, though, are required to be implemented, but we've seen, as has been in the case in the past, China and Russia are more weakly implementing them, turning a blind eye to things occurring in their countries. South Korea is now very actively advocating a reduction in the UN sanctions, if not exemptions, for South Korea economic engagement. The U.S. sanctions have not been remove. But the president said there are 300 North Korean entities that he's not sanctioning.
Bruce Klingner, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
You're watching BBC World News.